It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
And Barnet Bain. I just love that beginning. Thought-provoking and bold ideas.
We've got bold ideas
like Star
today.
Trek a
It
little
does.
bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I love it.
Didn't you write it?
No, I don't think so. I think it just happened.
It's spontaneous.
It just showed up on air one day. It wasn't me and it wasn't you. I don't know where it came
Some
from.
well-known voiceover guy just...
I thought it was you.
Shut up. I sent something to you and you rewrote it.
I did?
You're the writer. Yeah, I
Fantastic.
just send you ideas and you say...
Well, then I like it better.
Now you like it better. That's hysterical. So I'm thrilled we're having a conversation today because we're talking about something that both you and I are very fond of talking about, and that is story.
Yeah.
Look, a lot of us have stories about the way the world works that aren't really serving us. And the idea that we have the opportunity to tell a different story is a tremendous opportunity. But before we get into telling a different story, we really have to understand the nature of story. Why we construct stories. What is that about in terms of the human experience? And because you and I both work with stories, you, of course, have portrayed stories in film form. You've read more stories than anybody I can think of in terms of scripts and being involved with scripts and so forth, that that you're very intimate with the components of story. What is it about story that draws us in and holds our attention? And how do we consistently, as human beings, create and recreate these stories and take themes that seem to run throughout many different stories as reflections of human experience, as reflections of yada, 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 these pieces of our lives?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really, it's a delicious topic. I know we both love it. And I certainly love it. I mean, I realize that it's my whole life's mission and calling is to understand myself and others and develop kind of transform. And I do it as on the path that, like, it's almost the way of story.
Yeah.
So it kind of begs the question: what is story? What is story? And we've talked about it in a particular way. We could look at story as number one. A string of related events viewed from a particular perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Another definition might be a string of events that are made relational by a perspective. And yes, that's a paradox. True, that's a paradox. And in fact, it is the resolving of that paradox that is the whole stuff.
It's the opportunity.
It's the opportunity of transformation. It is the stuff of transformation.
Yeah, and there's an inherent need to make sense of things, and that's where we begin to, without even knowing it, frame things in a particular way, and then get people to collude with us on the story we've created, and then collectively there's these agreements that are all put into these stories that have layers to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the first kind of storytelling, and then the second kind of, that's the story. Strings of stories related from a perspective, where people collude to support our perspective. And then there is that second kind where we begin to realize we are the authors of all the stories.
That's right.
Totally authored it all, and people are participating in our stories, but we create them. But there's a third definition that I like a lot, and that's that stories are micro realities or mini realities. And like mini realities, like all reality, is a product of the same generating energies, raw materials and tools. And the raw materials of reality creation are belief and thought and choice and decision and attitude and feeling, emotions. And those raw materials are sculpted and filtered and reduced and expanded and twisted and embellished and artfully worked over, and sometimes, unfortunately, artlessly worked over by the tools. And the tools are desire and expectation and imagination. So, as you've mentioned, I do have a long history with stories, and I've paid attention over many years to thousands of scripts and stories and film pitches, and for purposes of this conversation, I found that there are 3 different kinds of story. The first kind of story is the story of what happened to me.
Right.
And this is the story we see everywhere. This is the story of all episodic television. This is the story of most daytime television. And when you look around at people's lives, it's almost all of what we see on the news, and it's most of what people's lives are about. This happened to me, that happened to me, this happened to me, and then he said, and then she said, and this was unfair, and I missed this, and what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
The second kind of story is a story about how I overcame what happened to me.
Right.
And this is the story. These are the kinds of American dream stories. These are the stories where one encounters what happened to me
Mm-hmm.
and ceases to be victimized by it and suddenly moves forward and finds solutions. How I achieved the American dream,
Right.
how I lost the weight, how I lost the weight, how I got the girl, how I won the corner office, how I became an athlete, how I overcame my limitations. That is, for a very long time, that has been the highest aspiration of folks. And then there's a third kind of story, and this one we see very much less, although we're starting to see it more and more. It's sort of poking through the weeds. The third story is the story of fate and fortune and destiny, self-chosen.
It's got the vision component
It
to it.
has the vision component. It's self-chosen. It's not some fate that happens to me. It's a fate that I choose. It's the story of who I really am to myself, to other people, to all that is. It is the story of connecting into consciousness and spirituality.
Well, and it has a conscious crafting component where we really are.
Yes.
We're already pulling from various components. We're putting things together in our own way, whether we know we're doing it or not.
But with the lights on now.
Well, see, the difference in the past is the lights haven't been on, and then it comes out in patterning. I mean, we it's wild because we get into these sort of archetypal and even trite stories. Let me guess: the boy meets the girl, but he can't have the girl, but he gets the girl, but then he loses the girl, and then he gets the girl in the end. You're kidding me? We're really going to tell that story? Yeah, we're going to tell that story again. You know that, and then we play those things out, as if that's a good idea to do that.
Yeah.
And yet we don't realize that we just have plugged in to a patterning.
A very, very familiar pattern.
Yes.
Very familiar. But, you do things. They say change happens in a second, in an instant. But until you get to that instant, could be a very long time.
Right.
But there are certain hallmarks, as you're beginning to already point out. There are certain hallmarks and qualities that pertain to this third story. And one of them is the ability to be open to the big picture, to see a big picture without losing sight of the current picture.
Sure.
And another one is to be looking to see what I can learn rather than what I can reaffirm from the past. And another one is about what I can give, more so on a continuum. From what I can get to what I can give, it clicks over in that middle balancing, that little middle fulcrum. Suddenly, the weight of it clicks over onto what can I give? Where are the ways that I can give? Give of my talents, give of the talents that I'm discovering, the abilities that I'm discovering, the sense of connection, the sense of community, all of those qualities. How can I give them? That's a quality of the third story. So, and then another one is the ability to understand that not everything can be solved in a rational, logical, linear way. So it is the third story is very much about moving beyond logic and reason without losing sight of logic and reason. We don't suddenly become but that there are more things on heaven and earth, Horatio, as Shakespeare said,
yes, of course.
than being able to be computational.
Yeah, that can be then can be thought of in your limited perception.
And
there is more out there. There's an expansive. There's a mystery that we can expand into and become more relational with, that allows for a new story. And when we say
third story,
and the new story, it may borrow from bits and pieces. It may, but it has this opportunity to transcend all of them. It is our potential that we have.
It's motivated differently.
Yes, it is. That's correct.
It is concerned about where it's going, not where it's coming from.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
It's not, there's nothing wrong with the first story. There's nothing wrong or bad. Don't misunderstand us, folks. But there comes a point in which we have examined and analyzed and harvested and looked into our past enough to realize, I know enough now that I can sort of leap into, where am I going? Where is the sense of future? Because without a sense of future, we don't have any ability to have hope. We don't have any ability to fire up imagination. We can't always be looking into the past for solutions. How can I reconfigure? All of this is even in itself is analytical. It's suddenly a leap into sort of this kind of poetry of possibility.
But there are things that will guide that. I asked the question, what story do I want to tell? What do I want? But from the standpoint of the qualities, what are the qualities that make this something that I can invest in? A story I can invest in.
Well, here are the qualities. So I love the segue.
Well, the qualities are the ones that allow me more fulfillment. It's a matter of, we talk in this program a lot about our edge, about what we bump up against, our capacity. And our capacities for things like intimacy, our capacity to imagine is a big one, because there's so much beyond the limitations of how we've defined ourselves.
Huge.
So as we get up to the edge of where we bump up against our story, and the familiar story, family is usually our tribe, our belief structure, our ideas, our agreements.
Our conditioning,
thank you. And we're locked into that. So as we bump up against that consciously, and begin to expand it. And it's only through imagination. It's only through the ability to see beyond the way it's been to what is possible.
The courage that is required.
Which comes from the French word that means heart.
Cœur, yeah. So this already there is a hint in that, a big hint. It is a move from being oriented from the head
to the heart,
to a felt sense. A heart sense.
Mm-hmm.
So as we begin to develop a relationship with the heart, this courageous movement into something unknown that is not structured in the same way, what evolves all by itself, there are certain gifts that begin to emerge, and one is a sense of meaning and purpose.
Okay. Before we go into that, I want to illustrate this because there was a beautiful moment, Barnet. You and I were sitting together. We're having lunch, and folks who listen know that we go to lunch a lot.
We have a lot of lunch.
We do. That's what we do. We go to lunch. We hang out. And we usually have a good time. And there was this moment in time. It was really special. And I want to just reflect it back to you. And you were talking about something, and you were... And I said something to you about what you were talking about in the context of how we talked about it before. And you were very emotional. And in that state, you kind of said to me...
Sweet sorrow we were
The sweet sorrow, that's right. And the old framing, you said, I'm letting go of that story. I'm letting go of that. And that's, I think, really challenging for folks, is that we have to let go of something. And we have to step into a place of unknown. But what you were trusting was a sense of the feeling quality, the emotional quality, not as a story, because oftentimes, that's where our feelings, by the way, become untrustworthy, is we wrap them up in stories. If we really just allowed our feelings to be a feedback system and allowed it just to flow through us, and you watch this with kids, they go up and down and all around, and they can attach themselves, and they're in and out of emotions.
And then we can likewise let our stories move in and out of us.
That's it.
So it's fluid.
Because as you were letting go of the story, this new conversation was emerging, and it was rich, and it was so rooted in how it felt to be you and the bits and pieces, but not tightly wound, just loosely brought in as a background, as a Now we talk in terms of a script, or we talk in terms of a movie as the sort of backstory, as the setting. And the subtext was woven in of the past, but not attached to it as if that's what it has to be in the future. And it was a beautiful expression of a kind of expansive potential of its, I don't know, we called it sweet sorrow.
What I'm feeling from you is another of the qualities of the offer. To use your language, it's the offer of the third story. That's another set of qualities specifically, I'm feeling the passion and the compassion.
That's it.
The compassion being the active caring that comes out of a sorrowful understanding, and the passion, which is the inspired focus.
It's what moves it forward. It's what moves it forward.
That's the expression of it.
And then we can give ourselves to things more fully, because we're not tied to a definition of how it's supposed to look.
And you're in the present.
And you're in the present, totally, absolutely.
You don't know how it's going to look. You're meeting it. You're meeting it. You're waiting to be discovered.
That's it. It's the unfolding of the story versus the directing of the story. Everyone who's ever read a script watches when scripts get overwritten. Like, you're kidding me. We're really going to do that? They're writing to the end of it.
They're usually writing first story.
Yeah.
Or they're writing second story. Sometimes the technique that's involved in the second story is crafted enough and skillful enough to elevate it. And mostly that's what we see in our high-end entertainments.
You know, it's interesting, too. How many times have you heard about a film or something where something happened where it was almost by accident, that they stumbled upon genius? That's so consistent with what we're talking about, the happy accidents, because it's where the form breaks down, and all of a sudden the function takes over.
The
all
imagination intrudes like a weed through concrete.
Yeah.
And the runner that goes out to that weed, that runner may have been a shoot from 20, 30 feet away. It's not linear.
Yeah. You know, as an actor, one of my great acting teachers was, he'd say, always leave the space to discover something new in any scene. In any, I did plays sometimes where we'd have a run of, 20 shows or whatever the number of shows was, and every night, to keep it fresh, what do? There has to be this space of, I don't know. There has to be a space for discovery, and that's where the magic happens. And and the challenge for actors is that once you have a great experience,
you repeat it.
You try to repeat it, and that's the mistake. If we understand, and you and I talk about this, even with intention directs experience. It does. But we only want to really be rooted in the quality or the essence of what we're going for. Not the expression, not the form. Don't be tied to what you think it has to look like. That's when we start to trip.
But don't not have a sense of what it's going to look like.
No, you explore the possible forms.
It's a placeholder.
Yeah.
That's what we're unattached to.
That's
we're unattached to a placeholder. Like going to a party and I see that little tent with my name on it, and I don't like the table I'm at.
It was just a suggestion anyhow.
It's a suggestion.
Look, it moved.
As long as the hostess is not looking, you can actually move it. It's a placeholder. The intention.
You were at that party too?
Yeah.
Oh, you were sitting next to me? I know how that happens.
That's how it happens.
Yeah, that's exactly right. No, but it is, you're right. It's a placeholder. It's a possibility of an avenue, but the ability to see that and allow for other possibilities.
That's wisdom.
Yeah.
And wisdom is a function of the third story.
And we have to trust ourselves if we're going to be able to do that. We have to become trustworthy. We have to become rooted in a sense of ourselves that allows for enough of us that we're not going to die.
You have to know yourself. You have to know your first story.
Yeah.
You have to know where you came from, what happened to me. You have to know this is what I did to overcome it. Mm-hmm. And then you have to know, but wait.
But wait.
There's more.
That's right. That's it.
And what the more is beyond logic and reason. The qualities of the more.
It's beyond known. It's beyond done.
It's
beyond
timeless. These are timeless qualities. What the stuff, the fragrance, we used that expression earlier, the scent that we're on when we're pursuing the third story is timeless. It has to do with beauty. It has to do with connection. It has to do with meaning. It has to do with character and principles. Principles, the lines and standards that you will not cross, and character. Character is the degree to which you live in accordance with your values.
That we choose. That we choose. So let me say this
all
because,
chosen.
well, this is where
First and second story, they're not chosen. They're assigned by the
They're
culture.
assigned by the collective. Thank you. So the idea is that is a principle. It's a principle. Everyone should do this principle. That's nonsense.
Not third story. Third story. They emerge,
choice.
and they emerge
That's right.
out of your meaning and purpose.
That's right.
Out of your sense of giving over getting. Out of your sense of passion and compassion. Out of the active caring. There emerges. Nobody has to be taken corporately to an offsite to receive the memo about what the values are. And what it emerges as an innate intelligence that expresses in the same way that a seedling shoots from a seed and spirals toward the light. This is us sprouting from the seed, from the pod of the first and the second story, sprouting toward the expression as to become vehicles like wind through a flute. To become vehicles of some aspect of ourselves, our higher selves, or our souls, whatever the tradition that one's coming from, being expressed through the stuff of our bodies into the world that we are the agents of the reimagining of.
And what you and I have talked about this, though it's deeply personal for us, and we recognize it has to be deeply personal, is that our universe, and I say our because it's, and I even say my universe, is desperately needing imagination.
Yes, it will not be. The challenges that we face will not be resolved in the second story. They will be resolved not through plotting and being strategic. They will be resolved out of the openness to insight and happy accidents and inspiration, the influx of spirit, inspiration.
And a faith or trust.
From beyond logic and reason.
From beyond logic,
logic and reason is a component that, and a very small one, that is a certain amount of logic and reason that is brought to bear in keeping your car from crashing into the one in front of you on the freeway. But all insight and all invention and all creativity comes from someplace that is timeless, comes from a place that is beyond the mental process. And then the execution of it is very much a mental process. But the solutions cannot be figured out in the dust of a blackboard. And that is an understanding, is a wisdom understanding of the third story. So the other component of the third story, that seventh component of the third story, is the emergence of vision. And it is the vision that holds the boundaries of what is possible. You have a small vision, very little is possible. You have an expansive vision, more irrational, illogical possibilities are available to you. And one of the functions of us being so married to logic and reason, to that Cartesian I think therefore I am model, is that our imaginations have become very, very brittle.
Well, this is it.
And so there has been a collapse of imagination. And in very many ways, our cultures, they devalue imagination is for children. It's dismissed. And this is the place from which innovation and inspiration is executed. So it's a serious problem. And then when you diminish imagination, you reduce expectation and you diminish desire. So suddenly we live in a world where people are very concerned about, is there going to be a tomorrow? They don't have the same kind of expectancy. It becomes about command and control and belt tightening, and people's expectations, their optimism becomes very, very reduced because the core imaginative values that we have as small children have been reduced to really nothing.
Yeah.
And for a number of reasons. A big one, and you and I have discussed this at length, is the systemic chauvinism that exists.
That's what I was going to get to. Is that we actually and look, we raise our hands with this one. We both talked about it. How we become intimate with that as it is in our own experience and how it gets expressed, so that we can begin to navigate it. This is the piece about becoming trustworthy. As we move towards those things that we recognize we're tripping over, it isn't out there. I get that it's being reflected back to me out there. I understand it. I see it showing up in spades. But it's to the degree that I can go into it in my own experience and negotiate it, because what I recognize about chauvinism is that it has inhibited everybody. It is this first second story.
Everyone.
It's a bad bargain. It castrates men. It disempowers women, and it's not working for anybody. It got us. Look, a lot of this.
It got us here.
Yeah, it did.
So
it's
not to say that it's a bad thing. It's not going to get us.
That's it.
Further.
That's it.
And we have got to reacquaint ourselves
Yeah.
with the tools of the reality creation. And one of the byproducts, the first casualty of chauvinism, is a dismissing of everything feminine. The imagination, the desire, the expectation, these energies are feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have been trivialized and dismissed in favor of doing.
And in favor of logic and reason.
In favor of logic.
We've been infatuated, as you put it before, with the straight line. We like it to line up. And the truth is, it doesn't line up. The fact that we're deluding ourselves to keep it lining up is not serving anyone. And as we become acquainted with, and I'm saying this back to you, the tools of reality creation, that we have so much more influence on our experience at some point in time. At some point in time, we realize we are the reality makers.
Then we get turbocharged. Then, now, if you just look at the history of the world in the last 20 years, this is sort of a convergent state we're in. It looks like the worst of times. It's also the best of times. Just over the last 20 years, the innovation.
The last 20 days.
20 days, yes. The innovation. We didn't have internets. We didn't have, I mean, just at the level of technology, but not only technology. 20 years ago, a consciousness discussion, 25 years ago certainly, a consciousness discussion was frowned on. Anybody that had anybody that even looked at issues of belief and thought and thinking and feeling, and this was, there was a stigma to being to investigating one's psychology. Spirituality was very much confined to a rigorous religious doctrine that is, again, outside in. Doesn't have to be. I'm not saying that it has to be, but primarily has been an outside in rule book, a set, some conduct.
It's a pretty tight story.
It's a very, very.
It
it's
fits
a very
within
tight
that
story.
construct.
And within it, there are those who have found freedom and have made it wonderful and
That's
beautiful and juicy. But so there has been this double track of the world getting tighter and tighter and tighter and less imaginative, and at the same time there's been an opening and opening and opening, and we're both incredibly optimistic, and
we choose to be.
We make a practice
Yep.
of juicing up the expectation, deepening the desire. I mean, there's a whole tradition, even a spiritual tradition, particularly in the East, of you don't want to have any desire. No desire. Feminine energy is desirous.
Turn it up.
When you
turn it up.
The idea of creating a thought, there is an energy of potential in that. Feminine energy is the potential, the space that potentiates. It is an energy that is pregnant with possibility, and then the integrated spirit inspired energy fills the space. And when it's integrated, it builds into it. It constructs out of it. But the disintegrated balance is one where the feminine energy is marginalized, and
there's a whole lot of constructing, and no one knows why we're constructing.
No one has any sense of purpose, or their purpose. Their purpose is self-serving.
Right.
The purpose is very, very much in distinction from what can I give in the way of my talents and strengths, and it's a very, very different model.
It's a different story.
So the rejuicing of desire, the amping up of expectation, the sense of exploring the imagination. And that begins with looking below what lies below our thinking. Thinking and feeling are always attached. When the relationship, the dance between thoughts and feelings, we call emotion, the energy, the motion. Mm-hmm. But we're not accustomed to going very deeply into our feelings. You know, somebody told me yesterday, literally yesterday, in this same conversation we were talking about earlier with these guys I went out with last night, that my iPhone has 24 bits, 1.7 million colors on the screen. But, you know, most guys, they walk into a paint store, they say, give me a can of blue paint. What color blue? Blue! Lighter, darker. So the monitor in my den at home, 3.7 million colors on that monitor. So how many...
There's some
shades.
Yeah,
sure, this is just the visible spectrum. Surely on the emotional spectrum...
That's right. That's right.
We can begin to crack open a thesaurus.
Yes. So there is an essence of experience that doesn't have language even.
There's no language.
Doesn't have...
Bingo.
Yeah.
When you put it, you collapse it into language, you're again chunking it down in order to make it accessible for filing.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's within those confines, those constructs, that we are limited to the stories that we are. The new story that each of us is crafting, that each of us has the potential to craft, can be rich.
Could be unlimited. Could be
rich.
I mean, most of the stories, you know, if I say to someone, doesn't always happen, but quite frequently we have this sort of discussion. People will say, particularly in my business, people will say, what are you talking about? I'm a film person. I mean, I have a huge imagination. And when you begin to go a little more deeply into it, I can imagine myself in a new circumstance, in a better job, in a healthier state, in a newer car, and this is all fine. But this is not a new paradigm of imagination. This is moving around the lawn furniture.
Yes.
So this is really an expression of all of my stories are other people's stories.
Right.
My imagination are other people's movies,
right.
Other people's news, other people's songs, other people's music, other people's dreams, other people's relationships, other people's advertising, other people's religions and values. When one is bold enough to own that.
Right. Well, that's the critical piece. Yeah, I mean, going back to this analogy of moving the furniture around, but it's the same house, and we keep moving it around, saying, "But look, this is really creative. I moved it over here."
And I'm painting the walls.
Yeah,
and that's great. But
painting the walls blue.
Yeah, but it's not a exponential blowing out of the possibility.
That's right.
And there's no vision in that says I see a world that is motivated by these sort of intrinsic values. Not by my people's relation. Is my value. Again, I'm not suggesting this is bad. I am. A lot of my psyche continues to dwell there.
We've talked about that often. You know, this is the whole New Year's resolution for me, is that I'm calling it my universe, my world. I'm owning it. I really want to own as much of my experience as I can, because I don't want to just give it over to the constructs. I want to own it. If it's mine, I'm taking it back. Now, how do I want to be with that? What do I want to do with it? What's the story I'm stepping into? What is it that I want? This element of vision where we can... Again, I'm going to go back to the box and the edge, that we get to the edge within our own consciousness. Where do we bump up against the walls? And what is it to extend beyond that? What is it to wonder and to explore and to allow all principles in the feminine realm, that it's this unknown, and it's this opening, and it's the opposite of confining and filing and doing and constricting. It's not that. It's the opposite. We did that. It's great. We got it all worked out. This is the whole deal.
It's pushing out the walls. It's raising the ceiling.
And there will be a pushback, because the construct pushed back. That's what it does. And yours and mine, individual constructs, have pushed back.
Yeah.
Big time.
I mean, my ego comes up really big time.
Yeah.
You know, you could fail. You could be humiliated. You could be shamed. You could be hurt. my envy kicks in, my jealousy kicks in.
But in the moment of sweet sorrow, Barnet, you don't care.
Well,
in
the moment of sweet sorrow,
you don't care.
That is a new development.
That is.
To share with our audience. This is he's referring to a conversation that we had earlier today, where I was repeating some dramatic, for me, discoveries, and a place where I have come to very recently of being able to claim this a little bit more of this territory. And my response to it, instead of feeling shame and instead of feeling, it's less shame, less anger, less of these other things, and more of the sweet sorrow of compassion for all of the years and the parts of me that still continue to function out of there. And I know that there are going to be listeners who misconstrue what I'm saying. It is a
we risk
place
that.
We do. It's a compassionate place, and I am beginning to love myself dearly enough.
That's right.
To not be patronizing and not to be judging, but just, as when my daughter was little and she'd skin her knee, I'd have a sort of sweet sorrow from it when I wasn't just trying to overwhelm her feelings and say, it's okay, it's all right, it's okay.
Right. Those soft moments. I'll tell you a little piece that's brilliant about this too, is that the working up to it, the work to allow it. I get it. Negotiating with all these aspects. But in the moment of experiencing it, what happens is all those evaporate. We call this points of reference. Mm-hmm. And once we string enough points of reference, I often call them perfect moments. Mm-hmm. People call them epiphanies. I don't care.
Biologists call it the phase shift.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful.
When all the cellular activity in a shoot, in a pod, in a seed, or when a calyx is about to open, there's all the cellular chaos. Just at a cellular level, everything goes nuts.
Right.
And then right at the moment of absolute maximal chaos, where everything appears and the structure is breaking down.
Yeah, because often a breakdown precedes a breakthrough.
There is an event that happens. The event is non-linear. It is an innate programmed intelligence. It doesn't arise out of something that appears to be growing in a predictable way. All of a sudden, out of this chaos, a shoot kind of emerges. And it goes from being one thing transmuted into an entirely different experience called like a shoot, where it used to be just this innate chunk of carbon, a seed, and then it becomes, grows, and then again, the seasons, those phases of love, it goes into chaos again, and then a bloom shoots out.
Now, in this context, we're only talking about a feeling. That's all. That's it.
Yes.
So the analogy is fantastic, and how grand it is in terms of its splendor, and it is that grand. Mm. We're just talking about allowing a aha, a surrendered aha, not a forced aha, not I figured it out aha, a coming to moment to emerge, and the sweetness of that, and the impeccable splendor of that, with no words don't describe it. It's just perfect. And yet the minute we say it's perfect, we've blown it. It's like it's got that quality of realness, of trustworthiness, of honesty, of humanity. It's everything.
It's beautiful.
Single moment,
it's beautiful.
feeling.
It's ecstatic, and it's said that the soul exults with joy at the slightest act of kindness and movement. Movement toward it. Soul waits waits for the spirit and waits to be found, and the spirit seeks the soul. And so I think that kind of animism of the feminine and that dynamism of the male, this doing when they're in balance, and they just kind of that dance. That's the excitement certainly the excitement that I know that we talk about, and we get and very animated.
And we're very strategic about setting ourselves up for these kinds of experiences. There's an element of risk. There's an element of creating a safe environment. There's an element of, personally, we have to become trustworthy. If we're going to go to the edge, we have to really know, to some degree, we're okay enough not to know.
To get to the end of the known.
Yep.
We work on these journeys. We frame and discover and work with ourselves to go to become boundary dwellers, to go to the edge of what is known about ourselves.
To go to the third story.
To go to the third story, and then to actually enter this. And that the third story requires constant recommitment. You go and you fling yourself into the unknown, and you begin to develop a relationship with the very unknown itself. You begin to become a lucid dreamer. I'm going esoteric. I'm sorry.
It's all right. I'm right with you. Right with you.
But it's you start as the fool, you become the wise fool.
Right.
You're a fool nonetheless.
Right.
You get to a place where you think you know it, and then you leap.
Yeah.
And I think with that, we're pretty much at the end of our.
Yes.
We've leapt.
We left. Well, listen, I love the story conversation. I love the third story, and that the third story is an evolving story. It will continue to evolve as we continue to explore new ideas, bold new ideas.
On Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to tell friends
next week
and
too.
Keep coming back.